Hi, my name is Philip Bither. I'm the Senior Curator for Performing Arts here at the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis. And with me is choreographer, interdisciplinary artist Ralph Lemon, who just last night we opened here in Minneapolis the first performance of a 3-performance run of your newest staged work, How Can You Stay in the House All Day and Not Go Anywhere? And so Ralph and I have known each other for a good number of years. I counted the other day, you've done through us here at the Walkers like 6 or 7 different projects across at least 4 different disciplines, and residencies and other things. But it's really great to have this moment right after last night, seeing 3 or 4 years of thinking and work come together so beautifully. And I wanted to ask, you've been on a personal journey as an artist and doing interesting work, curating dance platforms, writing, publishing books, creating installation works, and doing your own drawings and making performances. What in those other disciplines in the last few years, if you had to point to 1 or 2 things, would you say that you drew on in the making of this work, that you learned since the end of the geography trilogy that really helped you in applying to the making of this latest work?
Well, I think after in the midst of performing Come Home Charlie Patton, it was sort of clear to me that it was a work that kind of was stretching its boundaries.
Boundaries of what is
are stretching
theater?
My boundaries of what I thought I was making. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was a dance and it wasn't a dance, right? And I felt like it was a work that was kind of breaking its seams in the sense of it being a performance, right? As I knew performance. So something was kind of happening like conceptually and consciously for me in that work, but also there was something organically kind of, again, bursting at the seams. And yeah, it was very curious when I would think about how do I describe this work. Like what someone is looking at. Right. The sculptural elements, the video of the lynching site counter memorials, and that was the only way I could kind of bring that work and research to an audience in a theater, and how it was sort of iterating time. And
the little installation elements that were there as people came into the theater and things.
And then there was the whole narrative, the unreliable narrative, which was sourcing, real documented incidents, but also, fictional stories that were part on Arna Bontam's really beautiful short story, A Tragic Day, and then my interweaving my own, and I think some events from the performers themselves into the work. So it was also, it had a literary element in it as well. And I just felt like, it was really fun, like trying to kind of create this quilt with all these different ideas and mediums, and so it was very encouraging. And I feel like this new work has, took that idea and ran with it, in a way that I feel is very kind of satisfying, because I really don't know what I'm looking at when I
So in some ways,
experience this work.
It seems like that embrace of other disciplines really happened in your practice as a performance maker, not so much that you started developing your work as a visual artist or your work as a writer separately and then decided to fuse them into it. They really kind of bubbled forth from the work you made for the stage in some way. Right.
And well, yeah, because there's that sort of personal tyranny I have that exists for me with performance.
The fact that this is the channel you came up through.
Yeah, and this is where I've gotten so much of my support and so much of where my audience is. And so all these people in these other disciplines that are interested in my work, they're kind of interested in my work because there's a performative element in it, right? So it's really interesting. But yeah, the performance, the theater, this kind of proscenium stage environment, they're containing it all, and I think they give it the necessary tension that makes it interesting for me, and I think for people to watch.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff I'm doing doesn't belong in a theater, and that's what makes it interesting, I think.
Right.
Or maybe it does belong in a theater now.
Yeah, right. Or you've helped make it belong in a theater, and
or it could belong, right?
Yeah, I meant to ask, given that we're less than 12 hours away from the work opening here in what was your hometown, and just the only second live engagement of the work. It opened at the Curator Center at the University of Illinois. How did it feel after last night, the work?
It was really good to, and I'm constantly surprised with this work how important like doing it in front of an audience is, because and I had a similar experience premiering it at the Curator. It's a work that has been so much about a kind of personal research. And I'm getting more and more extreme in how I just want to process things. Do you know?
What do you mean?
Well, it's just I'm losing, I think, and I hope I'm not romanticizing this, I'm losing or deeply not acknowledging the need to perform it, right? I really love going into the studio and asking questions. And I think those questions are informed or activated by the idea of at some point I'm going to have to show this.
Right.
But I'm not, you know what I mean? That's the last thing kind of I'm thinking about. And it's really just the engagement of the idea with Walter, or a piece of paper and a pencil, or the performers in a studio. There's such a life, and there's almost like, I feel like a kind of holistic ecology that's just about the questions, and their possibilities. And when it comes into, because I remember when we got to the Curator, we were in their big theater for the whole time. And it was outrageously intimidating for me because it was no longer a studio.
Right.
There was always a number of empty seats facing us as we were asking the same questions. So the questions became really different.
Did you feel vulnerable?
Absolutely. Yeah. And because it became more about someone's now going to be watching this.
Right.
And I think I knew that all along, but it's like to have to really confront that, I think was very challenging. And then we got used to being at the Curator. So being in that theater every day, it became kind of like a studio. But then when people began to sit in the chairs, for the dress.
And it was just one public performance, right?
Well, we had a open dress, and then we had the one public performance. So it was still kind of like scrappy, It's like, well, it was sort of a performance, but not, because there's only one. And then when we got here, and it was like 3 shows.
Yeah. And there's a few extra days, not your standard just come in and roll in.
So there's a couple of, these couple extra really wonderful days of kind of getting ourselves, or inhabiting now the Walker.
Yeah.
It created a different kind of like concern, but a similar one. It's like, it's a theater again.
Right.
Right, and there's that interesting tension. And I think last night, or a day before during the dress, I was really nervous. And not so much about like, are they going to like this or not, but just like sharing this information.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of inherent with the work. But the audience felt really necessary at the same time. Not to contradict all that I've said. So I know that that's an important element to this. And I feel like that's just something I have to kind of really continue to negotiate emotionally.
Do you think you'll continue? You've got a really healthy tour now for the next 2.5 months. Do you think you'll continue to feel some tension and vulnerability at every performance?
I think every space we have to inhabit the work, because, I don't know, it's, I feel like there's an element to this work that's about ceremony and ritual. And so in that sense, the space becomes really important. And how do how do we befriend the space? How do we really get to know the space? Because it's like space becomes the container,
right?
And it can't be just a random theater, right? So we have a history at the Walker, which is great.
Right.
So all that
and you guys
came rolling back into
last summer. It was you kind of had a nice breakthrough,
and
in
we
a couple
built
of weeks.
we built a very substantial sketch,
right,
here about a little over
last
a year
July,
ago.
Yeah, a year ago, July.
So that was really helpful, and made it feel, I think, engage the work in a way that's really important.
You open the piece with you basically coming out, sitting in a chair, and talking really to the audience in a beautifully written way, with video showing, and it's a very honest and direct approach to the audience. You really are opening it up for them, and I wanted to ask about that choice. And it's rare, I think, these days in contemporary dance, in performance, except for perhaps a solo monologuist who's doing a personal first-person story, for a work to start or to ever really include this kind of honest, laying out what you're about to experience. Why did you choose to go that route with this piece?
And the work is built on a series of accidents. Maybe they're not accidents, but these things that kind of, I don't know, I feel like maybe alchemy is a better way to describe it. There's a certain action that comes up, and then there's a consequence. And from that consequence, I discover like a material that, then I can aestheticize. And so for the film talk, it was Anne Rosenthal, my sort of producing manager, asking me if I would talk to a number of presenters during APAC about this new work. And you were supposed to be there, I think.
I know. I was like, we're there already.
Yeah,
I thought it was just going to be like a pitch session,
And I was, right? It was going to be, and I thought, well, I'll talk about some of the ideas I have for this new work. And then I thought, well, no, this is an opportunity for me to, maybe just put something together, just have fun putting something together that's in my head. And I felt like that would be easier to do by just putting a video together than just sort of talking. Putting a video together and then actually writing a text. Really kind of...
So actually making a small presentation.
Adding a little rigor to what was
other
asked.
Than you just standing up saying, I'm working on this. Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So I kind of did it for me, and I thought, well, what's in my head? How do I really describe Walter and Solaris and my own, sort of experience with losing my partner, and then the Walho dance from Come On Charlie. How do I talk about all that?
Yeah.
So I got together with my editor, Mike Taylor, and we put together a 36-minute film, and I wrote some text for it. And I was only going to do it for APAP.
And were those films some of the beautiful ones shot down with Walter in Little Yazoo?
Yeah, Little Yazoo City, Mississippi.
Yazoo City,
Little Yazoo, where he lives.
Yeah.
And just stuff that I have that I've been working with.
So those existed, and
Absolutely.
you just sort of shaped them into...
I just put them together to kind of to show this is what's in my brain.
Right.
And I wrote some text to kind of help describe that. And I thought I would only do it for the APAP.
Right.
And I did it, and it's like it was completely silent afterwards, and people,
Within hours, I had people coming up to me.
Anne was crying.
Oh my God, we should have seen Ralph's showing.
And I thought, what have I done, right? I mean, it's totally not about performing. And then I thought, well, and then I had friends telling me afterwards that it was a performance. They saw it as a performance. And I resisted for a while and thought, well, no, that's not what this work is.
Right.
And I kept resisting, and I kept being encouraged that it was part of this, or could be.
Right.
And then I thought, well, okay, maybe it can be, but I have to rework all the text. I can't have it that autobiographical. I'm not going to let it be that personal. So I went away on a sort of writing vacation and tried to rewrite it and could not rewrite a word.
Oh, really?
I couldn't really change anything.
Because it's beautifully
I just wanted to make
crafted.
it more fictional.
Have you changed it since?
Yeah, well, I've gotten deeper into to the reality of it, you know? So I'm telling more of the truth now, which it's calling for. So that's been really intimidating.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was kind of like an accident. I had no idea that this would be a substantial part of the work. But I think it was also really necessary because it kind of guided me conceptually in how kind of honest I need to be in this work. Like, there's this element there's a required element of honesty.
On a personal level.
On a personal level that's really required. And
so even though it was an accident, it ultimately made structural sense. It made a content-based sense for you too. It went in line with what your intent of the work was.
Yeah.
Really.
And then when I look at the film now, it sort of forecasts what's coming. So from the film, I was able to see what the rest of the work could be like, right?
When you say the
So
film,
it was also,
you mean the edited sequence of all the different film elements?
Yeah. I mean, that came before everything else,
and,
really.
And I thought it was particularly in a big big theater
so there's
setting.
There's some divination quality about it as well.
And the fact that you showed a fairly long selection from Come Home, Charlie Patton is sort of audacious and wonderful because most artists would never show a piece on video in a live theater of the last piece they just did, you know. But it fits so nicely. And was that a debate at all about how much to show, or of a live theater work, but on on?
Well, one of my questions was, well, what do I make after Come Home, Charlie Patton?
Right, and we talked a lot about that.
I was like, I might be done.
Right.
I mean, it was, it was a very, like, it was just very demanding and felt, like the end of something. Of course, it was the end of the Geography trilogy, but so yeah, I feel like this work kind of, in part begins from where Come Home, Charlie Patton left off, like theatrically, aesthetically, and personally. Right. So it had to be part of it.
And even on a movement level, it was so wonderful to see some of that movement then just erupt live and kind of continue to the next level or something. Do you it's such a work based in personal experience, this experience of personal intense loss and pain. How did you navigate those lines around making it still universal for an audience? Were you concerned at any point about, will this just be about my experience, or how did you open it up, which it clearly works as something everyone at some point in their lives has to confront grief and loss, but you really were able to find that balance somehow?
Well, in some respects it was, if not easy, natural, in that I know my relationship to my creative process and practice is more accessible than grief. Like how to live with that, how to access that. So I just accessed what I always do, which is make things. And now I had to make things like living in grief, right? Or mourning, and I just kind of trusted that. And I have, I must acknowledge my support system, who really kind of understood both aspects of that in my life. And you know, the performers
Right.
would sit and let me, you know, wail in the, you know, the beginning rehearsals and just be present for that, Oakley especially. And I think they were all very clear in the beginning that, okay, they're you know, they're being surrogates. And then, but there was also an important element to it having to evolve. That right now we're throwing our bodies around for your grief, but at a certain point we've got to be throwing our bodies around for our own thing, whatever that is.
Within their own lives.
Whatever that translation is. They can't know my grief or my mourning, and they can't know my sadness, and they shouldn't. But there are other reasons to be that alive, right?
And did part of
you know, Oakley's in the beginning was crying for me, and now she's got a crying book.
Right.
So
what is in it? I mean,
just, you know, stories from
her own life? Or?
Yeah. At one point she interviewed all the performers about experiences they had that were devastating to them on some emotional level. So that's part of her crying book. And then there are things from her own life. And then there are photographs of just really sad, horrible things that are happening all over the world. So she's crying for the world.
Right.
Herself and the world.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, she's surfing. So she's in it. She gets in her, you know, as an actress, she's able to kind of technically find that place. And then she surfs it for 8 minutes every night. And so that's been the narrative. Like, it began with, you know, Ralph being really sad and needing to make art with his friends.
Right.
And then his friends, like, figuring out a way to kind of, like, make it bigger. And so I feel incredibly grateful to them. They absolutely kind of helped open the work up, you know, beyond.
Yeah, it sounds like that step from the translation from your life to theirs really led to the step that is critical of the translation to a broader audience population and how they can tap in.
Yeah. And Jim with the video, you know, his sense of the you know, what he can do with video. Like, he's a magician, and right? So for him, it's just a different kind of, you know, synthesizing of of what Ralph is and what Ralph is vibing and what he's translating from me, and Jim going to that world that Jim needs to live in, you know, which is really kind of brilliantly wacky and quirky and evanescent, you know, and so I've had these great collaborators who have made who have translated, you know, the personal that I've brought to it, and, you know, if it's not universal, they certainly have made it into a much bigger, you know, accessible world.
Yeah, it seems like a company that is almost more like a family. I mean, you had your own company for 10 years or so. You've assembled other groups of performers for different parts of geography and things, but this group of performers seems, you can feel it from the house watching the work, that this feels like a group that really trusts each other on a level that's different than a standard dance company. Is that, obviously that sounds like what your experience is with working with them.
Yeah, I feel like it's not a collective, but almost. And I feel like where we're all on the same page, and I don't think this is a stretch, but that everyone kind of believes in the locus of the work, which I think is sort of beyond grief and mourning and my, you know, particular sort of placement right now in my life, and more about just this idea of you know, meaning, and, you know, these pure aspects of just existence that, you know, it's like certain points, you know, it's like we are alive. And that's pretty profound, do you know? Like, like being alive is really kind of miraculous.
Right.
And
but we mostly, through most of our lives, sort of ignore that fact, or somehow don't feel it.
Yeah. And I think I kind of, activated the question because I dealt with some extreme absence.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I brought to the table. It's like, absence is energetic. It's really alive. And then if you're alive along with that absence, like alchemically, something, something really interesting can happen. So I feel like that's what everyone is sort of searching for in their particular actions within the work. So it's very, the dancers are not performing.
Right.
Do you know? There is something that they go through for 20 minutes every night that doesn't necessarily make them feel good, that they can't really accomplish. Like you ask them, how was it? And they have, they can't really articulate it.
Yeah, they're not saying, oh, I wish I had spun this way instead of that way.
And Jim, watching his work, like in the, what he's trying to do with the video, it's just, it's like he's infinitely mining it. Do you know? Like there's no perfection here.
Right.
Although we've stripped it down so that that's what we're like all thriving for, but we also know it's not possible. So in the action of it is the point. Do you know? The doing.
Right.
And that we can't really say no. Like you have to do it.
Right. And that's what you said the other day to some students here. You said, this is the difference between pretending and being. This is the real thing. You're watching a real thing. And I wondered. You're
watching a real thing in an
unreal environment.
In an unreal environment. And that's where it becomes very beautiful. Right? I mean.
Yeah, because your choices on a design level and the structure is rigorous, and you've made a lot of artificial is probably the wrong word, but very carefully thought through, minute decisions around how to make this thing. But you were able to still maintain the realness within it. And how is that balance to work out?
It's been really, it was shocking.
And what do you mean?
Because there's nothing in the work. There's nothing. And especially here at the Walker, the other places will have a projection, but here we didn't need a screen, so there's nothing.
Right.
I mean, there's really nothing. There's some sounds, but I'm like.
I didn't even think of that because it feels like there's so much.
Right. Well, there is.
Yeah.
But that's and that's where the title comes in. The whole of course you can stay in the house all day and go everywhere, right? So.
Oh, I never really thought about that.
There's 2 points to it. There's the point of like
how can you?
And then there's like you can go everywhere. And so what's been a revelation for me is because Come Home Charlie Patton had so much in it.
Right. Set, costumes, physical.
Yeah. And what's been shocking about stripping things down is how much of the details become apparent. Like pauses and transitions and timings and sound and energy. All those things become so much more pronounced. And so that's where the focus is. So we're actually taking more time teching this work with nothing than I spent teching.
Right.
And that's amazing to me.
And as a presenter or as someone who manages budgets and stuff,
like, why
I remember
need so much time?
when I got the tech stuff and the rentals, I was like, I had told them a certain figure for our budget, and the budget was like, and I was like, yeah, it's just basically Ralph and the dancers and a video screen. He's got a chair. I mean, it should be.
And it's a particular kind of chair.
Right. And the lighting is very particular very beautiful.
Very. But that was, I don't know, again, it was a beautiful revelation. It's like, oh, there's so much in this idea of nothing. And I think that becomes also a premise for how we're thinking about the work energetically, compositionally, aesthetically. Like, okay, you just have an essential element. And then that essential element has to say, like, everything. Right? Along with its nothingness, right? Is it there, is it not there? It's very important.
I came across this quote when I was looking at something else the other day, and it so struck me as to what you're talking about right now. It's from Susan Sontag from her book Against Interpretation, and it was written in the early 60s about how art, she felt, needed to mean, that it should not mean, but should instead illuminate. We must learn to see more, to hear more, to feel more. Our task is not to find the maximum amount of content in a work of art, much less to squeeze more content out of the work than is already there. Our task is to cut back content so that we can see the thing at all. So do you feel like these cycles of influence still reside in you? I mean, in some ways I think of Sontag and that era of the early 60s and Judson and stripping back and certain kind of minimalism. I mean, you're doing something very different with it, but did that continue to influence you, some of that thinking and work?
No, well, not so much. I think it has, for me, more to do with just getting older. Like, I feel like just in my life, and I mean, and it was accelerated by losing Asako, but just like,
right.
oh, like you know, like there are only really a couple of really important things in life, really important, you know? And then if that's the case, what are the really important things, you know, to us individually? And so in that sense, to me, like, okay, making art now, what's really important? Like, what really do I need? Like, to say what I need to say, or to be curious, right? And, you know, I think it's probably true for most art practices. Like, the more an artist is at it, the more simplified it becomes. Because you realize you don't need to sort of write a novel or paint a painting or make a dance about this, this, and this. You just need to make it about, you know,
where you're at or what.
Right.
Yeah. So in some ways it's less, and obviously it comes through in the work this way, it's not so much about formal concerns, a formal stripping back. It's more of a kind of almost philosophical, spiritual stripping
That's what
back.
I feel. And I think for some, it absolutely can be a formal device. And I think maybe what gets a little confused is that when it becomes sort of simplified for whatever reasons, philosophically or spiritually, or physically, because the body starts to not be able to move like it could move when I was 20, that, again, there's a tyranny of making art, so there's an element of formality that's always present. And so that's been an interesting contradiction in this work for me, is that it is so personal and yet it's in an art container.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's living in theaters.
Right.
And I'm kind of having a good, challenging time with that. Do you know? That a lot of decisions I'm making about when Okri cries and when she stops.
Right.
And you know, how, I mean, that the Warhol dance is quite wild, and I can talk till I'm blue in the face about how it's about no form and no style, but it's extremely rigorously composed in a weird way. Right. Do you know? So I feel like that is, I don't know, that's comforting in a way. Do you know, that these things that can feel overwhelming, beautifully overwhelming, can also feel natural.
That's great to hear, because I know a few years ago when we've talked, you had some bigger questions about whether...
I was fighting the theater a lot then.
I'm glad that you found it.
And I think Come On Charlie Patton was visualizing and performing that battle. You know, it's like, it doesn't belong here. It belongs in Mississippi, or it belongs in my memory, or it belongs in a book, or
only in process, not in.
Or only in process. And now I'm like, no, the only in process can live in this theater and thrive. Right. And be shared. So I think that's the new...
And have meaning, real weight of meaning,
and have meaning
for people.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that I think you use the term aestheticizing emotion, or you've got these raw emotions built that the work is weighted with, but then you're having to choose exactly at what moment does Oakley stop crying, or how to, and it does seem like what you're saying is you've been able to not let one corrupt the other or make the other feel less important or somehow trivialized or something.
Right. And it's tricky, and I think in its trickiness, there's also a very real, honest confusion that is very, very much inside and surrounding this work that we have to continue to negotiate with me, with myself, me with the performers, and me with the collaborators. Oakley just said the other day, like, she was really mad at me. I think it was after our dress or something. And I said, why? She said, oh, I was, well, because she's crying, and she's really crying, so she's completely out of control, and yet she has a container.
Right.
And I'm tried to continue to refine the container. Right. So I'm giving her more sort of rules.
Direction, kind of, yeah.
Sort of. And I know the conflict of that.
Right. Yeah.
And she kind of understands the need for it.
Right.
But there was a part of her that just got really pissed off, because it's like, it's really hard.
Right. Just let me cry.
So, you know what I mean? So
sure.
on a really human,
right,
interpersonal level, these things are very fragile. The work is very fragile.
Did you ever have moments where you felt like, I can't push my friends too far?
In watching them last night, I was just thinking this morning that, we have 2 more performances and we have a tour, and I can't imagine them getting through it. And they will.
Right.
But they're giving so much of themselves, and the work requires that they not not hold back, right? And so how is that possible?
Right.
So in some way individually, they've got to tap into something where they can continue to kind of be that generous.
Right.
For really questionable results, like, on a more traditional element of like why we perform.
Right.
The ego.
Right.
Sure. Like, I nailed this. I accomplished this.
Right.
I'm not sure that's kind of what any of us are getting back from the work. And I think the way we've been talking about it recently, and this may be full of shit, but it's helpful to think about, like, again, this idea of generosity, that there is something that's sort of beyond our own particular rigorous, challenged actions that's important to share to an audience. The doing.
Right.
That the doing, as fraught as it is not only enough, but really kind of profound and important.
Yeah. In hopes that the audience will leave with something much more than they came in
or
with.
just leave with something.
Right. Yeah.
And a belief that that's happening.
Yeah. Right. Did you have worries, given the intensity and the honesty, of the group dance section and then of Oakley's section, that you'd lose a lot of people in the house?
Yeah.
It didn't happen last night, really, at all. And
yeah. Well, it's, Minneapolis. It's not your normal. Or the walker, right? I think people will, my hope is that, here in Minneapolis, and just kind of like what the walker represents, people are going to come expecting something interesting or challenging, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to take them longer to walk out than most other places.
Also, the Minnesota politeness. And
at the Curator, we had quite a few walkouts.
Yeah. Now people
and
were,
cell phones going off. And but I think, and a Q&A at Curator, someone asked me about that, and did that bother me? And I said, no, because I feel like I don't know what this work will communicate, really. I mean, I have
less so
hoped,
than any other work. Would you say? Yeah,
because it's so stripped down and kind of honest and in what it's, I feel like what we're working on. And so in a beautiful way, I've kind of let go of the expectations of response.
Yeah.
Do you know? And you know, to have someone walk out seems legitimate, maybe.
Right, and I think it's the response is more than a lot of really even open abstract work is much more about the individual's own life experiences or how they deal with those experiences and their pain and whatever else. And so you're going to get probably as many responses as there are people in the house. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you about, if you could talk about Walter Carter, what he first means to this work. What place does he hold in How Do You Stay in the House All Day and Not Go Anywhere? And what place does he hold for you as a person?
Well, he's an anchor. He really anchors the work for me. And, you know, he passed away in March, so it was unexpected but big loss, another big loss. And you know, I say this in the film. He's my teacher. He was my teacher, but also my playmate. And you know, we started working in 2002. And
how did you first meet?
I was doing research for Come Home, Charlie Patton.
Right.
And Jimmy Duck Holmes, who's owner of the Blue Front Cafe, sort of well-known juke joint in Bentonia, Mississippi, asked if I wanted to meet the oldest man in Yazoo City, which is
really?
nearby.
Oh, I didn't know. That's how. Okay.
And I said, absolutely. And I met him when we had an interview, and I fell in love. It's like, you know. He showed me some juke joint dances, and he told me about a lynching he'd seen. So I felt like, you know, everything I needed to know was in that 100-year-old body. So
did you confront? Did you sense through your relationship a level of confusion on his part about what you were after?
No.
Or so you guys really hit it off on a personal level.
Yeah, and I think just as a human being, he exhibited such openness and generosity and fearlessness, and it was inspiring. And I felt like this is how I want to live my life. Now, karmically, I know when I'm like in my 80s, someone's going to come knocking at my door asking me to come out and do some really strange, weird stuff, and I'll have to do it. But
so it wasn't just that his age and his history and the things he'd lived through, but quickly you came to learn that this is a very unique, special individual.
I've never met a man like that in my life. I've never met a human being like that in my life. You know, and it was very much about all those other things, his history, a black man in Mississippi, he's lived there all his life, what he's seen, and his, how to describe it, the way he held it all. Like, you know, there was not a lot of anger, there was like, you know, there was no hierarchy of, this was bad and this was good. It was like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. This is all my life.
Had he met many African American people who were raised in the North?
Well, he's got a huge extended family,
he does.
of course.
Yeah.
And they have these big, on every birthday, I think when he was in his 90s, that, you know, like hundreds of people would sort of show up.
Oh, really?
So he has family all over the place, right? But you know, he lived and died in, you know, a sort of area of Mississippi that encompassed a parameter of maybe 20 miles. But it was his openness. And, you know, the work that we did, it's like he was an incredible artist and performer, and you know, and that was also like amazing to me, like where that came from. The willingness to just like try stuff. You know, basically I would ask him, you know, like I'd show him things and say, so would, you know, how about if we work on something like this? And then we would just turn the camera on.
Would you do most of those things in front of a camera? You wouldn't necessarily do them just to do them and see how
Oh, he would care less about the camera.
Right.
So really just like, it was for him the doing.
Yeah.
And then what I realized is that, it was his work ethic. You know? And then to me, it goes back to kind of Candide, Voltaire's, right? Like at the end of the day, you got to tend the garden. I mean, that's life. It's like all this other stuff that happens, like the good, the bad, the tragic, the ecstatic. At the end of the day, as human beings, we, you know, all we have is work. I mean, like, you know, daily, like tending the garden.
It's interesting.
And I think Walter really, like he knew that in his, you know, he knew that cellularly.
So he saw this also as part of his daily work, in a sense.
Yeah, and I paid him. Right? Yeah, so every day he got cash at the end of the day, and there was a nice agreement, you know. And then we involved his wife Edna, and she was a lot more self-conscious, but she also had a lot of fun. So there was that element too. I think we had enormous fun in the work.
And you said you referred to Walter as the anchor of this artwork that you made. How do you mean by that? What was you know, this is a work that came out of a lot of personal experiences, a lot of more abstract ideas of pain and living life, and then is it the fact that he had lived all this history and the way he was in the world that you felt was a kind of model in a certain way?
Well, yeah, and it goes back to this idea of the real versus the artificial. What was sort of brilliant about working with Walter, is that no matter how I tried to aestheticize our relationship, he expanded it. I could put him in a spacesuit, I could put him in a spaceship, I could have him,
beat you up as a rabbit. I love that.
I could have him beat me up as a rabbit. And he just went beyond the aestheticization every single time. So, yeah, to me, that's the anchor. I mean, that's what this work is trying to do.
Just like we were talking about before, right?
And, you know, so that's my motto. And, you know, I basically would ask him to do things I felt like I wanted to do, but no, I couldn't because I just wasn't Walter. You know, so I could turn on the camera and have Walter do stuff. And for me, it's just now I can study those things the rest of my life. And hope that maybe one day, like, you know, I'll get to that kind of essential play.
And in losing Walter a few months back, it had obviously he's 102. You said it was expected, but is there a big hole that you feel in your life in that way?
Yeah, I just called Edna yesterday, and his wife, and I was like, wow, you know, because I would call him all the time. It's like, God, I know I miss him, and we talked about her life and how she's sort of missing his presence, because she was really the caretaker. I mean, he was in better shape than she was, weirdly, but she was the emotional caretaker.
Right.
And it's weird. It's not like I miss Asako, you know. It's not like I miss my lover, my partner.
Right.
It's like missing this. It's a different kind of absence. It's like I knew that my work with Walter in this weird way was about his mortality, but also about, like, it was like the concept of mortality as something infinite. So I was always going to be able to go down south and work with Walter's dying. Do you know? It's strange, but when he actually died, I was shocked. I couldn't, like, place that whole.
Right.
Even though the work was very much about that. But I think because, you know, there was such vitality in play, and we could always laugh about it. I mean, every time we laughed in the last few years, he would say, I don't think I'm going to see you again. And I'm like, Walter,
And his presence on the videos, which are so beautifully shot, it almost feels like this person is halfway between worlds.
Yeah.
You know, he has a sort of, there's also like a transparent quality about his body and the way he lived in space and things.
Well, that was part of the attraction, you know, or part of what I knew, the gold mine for me, like.
Right, yeah.
Part of like my love for being around him. He was totally, you know, by the moment I met him, he was at that place where he was transitioning. And I think that was also inspiring, like watching someone transition that way.
Right.
Do you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting that when you said, you know, here's a gold mine or an opportunity, once again, in like the layers we talked about with your dancers in this work, you had to navigate a line between here's some great material for your work, while at the same time, here's a great person who I care deeply about and have established a relationship. So you had to find that place again, it sounds like, between what is art and what is your personal life and things.
Yeah, and in some ways, even the dancers have now entered that gap.
What do you mean?
Know, that,
yeah.
That they're now they're deep friends. They're not dancers.
Right.
It's not a
family.
company.
Yeah.
They're really family.
Yeah.
And so when I watch them, I care so much, you know?
Yeah, sure.
About what they're doing on stage. And so in some respects, they're younger versions of Walter. And I'm not sure how that got.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that got, you know, whatever that exchange is and was, but it's similar.
Well, and I'm sure it came from really many of the performers, 8, 10, 12 years relationship, all through Come Home Charlie Patton. And, but I was interested in also asking you about the courage it takes. You pretty honestly talk about some themes of the work, as in things like grace and love, that most contemporary artists, whether they be in visual,
touch those words, right?
Exactly. And you know,
and yes. Right?
Yeah, and yes. Yeah. I mean, Yoko, it's been since Yoko or whatever. But, you know, did you fear? I mean, it's funny to say that in the world of contemporary art, one has to be courageous to use words like love about their work. Right. But it is that fact. And so, did you ever worry that you'd be viewed as naive or too soft or somehow, you know?
Well, I think, again, getting back to Walter, you know, there was that period of time when I had Walter on one end and Asako on the other end. And I was surrounded, like the two of the most important people in my life were dying.
Right.
And one's dying was invigorating, Walter, and one's was like breaking my heart.
Yeah.
And so I think it helped me get to this place where I just had to deal with some very, very essential things, you know, just about myself and what was important again.
Right.
And I think that, you know, then after Asako's sort of remarkable dying, it's like something broke, like fear broke. And I realized
fear of those,
of just everything.
Consider, especially
it's like I am now experiencing the greatest fear of my life, and I experienced it.
Right.
And so now there's nothing else I need to be afraid of. So I don't go into this work thinking, oh, this will be courageous to do this. There's just things I don't care about anymore.
Right.
I absolutely don't care about certain things anymore. And I can use the word love now and really know it and feel it and believe in it and grace. And so, yeah, I'm happy. I feel like I've kind of discovered these things that I maybe was really like afraid to sort of announce or acknowledge. And no, I'm not. I completely believe everything I'm saying in this piece. And I will keep saying it night after night after night, you know, to whoever will listen. So, yeah. I mean, the thing of fear has been interesting, right?
Fear, like in one's life in general, or
in
just
one's life in general, but
yeah.
also I think in in the creative process,
Right.
like the politics of what's right and what's wrong, or what's acceptable or what's not, or how one should protect themselves or their ego or their reputation. I feel like I don't know what my ego is at the moment. I don't know what my reputation is at the moment, and I kind of don't care. Do you know? I have a strong sense that I really want to be generous right now in my life, as a human being and as an artist. And if that's a belief system, then so be it. And and I feel like with my work with Walter and with my past relationship with Osco, I learned love in a really big way. And so it just seems to me like, well, those are really good things to try and make art about. Jim said something really interesting during one of our talkbacks. Because he's quite brilliant. And
Jim is also one that is quite tough.
He's very tough.
He's not going to.
But he's also really soft.
It's soft and it is. And we should mention this is Jim Finley who created the videos.
Yeah.
And great.
But he's an incredible collaborator and really been a nice guide for me in this work. And he just let this out. I didn't know he had really studied Come Home Charlie Patton or the trilogy. Like when we started working, and he went back and kind of started looking at my work. And he was talking about we were talking about what we couldn't bow after this new piece.
Right.
So we were very conflicted. Like, do we bow? Do we not bow? And he wanted us to bow. And so one night we tried not bowing, and his response was, we tried bowing in a really weird way.
Yeah.
And he's like, the bow's confused. He says, and nothing else in this work is confused. And then he went off. He's like, this work is so different from Come Home Charlie Patton. Come Home Charlie Patton was so confused. And he was absolutely right. Is it this? Is it that? There's these stories, there's the sound, there's civil rights movement, ecstasy.
Installation.
And he meant it as a compliment.
Sure.
But he was like, this piece is so not confused,
Right.
And I think that, so I find one or two things that I really believe in, and let it be about that, and not obfuscate, not trying to create all these other, barriers.
Right.
Don't veil it.
Well, I think with that, it's a great place to end, because it is a piece that, as you said, that ultimately is about grace and about generosity and love. And I want to just thank you for making this work and for being here in Minneapolis and presenting it to our audiences. So.
Well, thank you again and again for continuing to have us back. I think I could not have made this work and all that came before without your support. So, a similar generosity.
Wow, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.